Right, well, why don't we go ahead and call the boards to order. Let's start east to west, SDIC.
Thank you, Claudio. This time I'd like to call the Sandy Drainage Improvement Company Board to order. And we'll do a roll call. Chris Damkin.
Present.
Betsy Emery.
Present.
And Tanny Stephenson is present. We are in quorum. Thank you.
All right, let's go ahead and do MCDD.
Ken, you don't look muted, but I see your mouth moving and hear nothing. So there's an audio issue.
Oh, looks like Ken may be having some audio issues.
Use my computer.
There's an echo on that, Ken. I can go ahead and call the roll for MCDD while Ken gets that straightened out, if you like. So let's see. Corky Collier.
Here.
Kenzie Berry.
Hi, this is Kenzie. I'm on mobile for just a few moments here.
Great. Darian Santner.
Hello.
And Ken Anderton.
Here.
Perfect. And then if you weren't aware, Heather King was elected to the MCDD board at our recent landowner meeting in place of Nikki Schultz, who stepped down. So welcome to Heather. We haven't kind of finalized all the paperwork, so Heather's just attending this meeting and won't be voting today, but welcome, Heather, and thank you very much for your service.
Hello, everyone.
Emily, did you see Eric Molander needs to be unmuted?
You know, I cannot manually. I clicked to ask to unmute, so it should be a pop-up for him, but I don't see that I can manually unmute him.
Eric,
Yes, I did see.
if you can unmute, if not, we need to fix that. We've had this issue before, and I want to make sure. Bummer. Any thoughts, Emily?
I can send him the phone information again, and you can call in on the phone. Let me forward that. Do you want me to go ahead and call the roll for Pen 2 while we're waiting?
I'd really like to be able to hear Eric.
Okay, let me forward that call-in information, and then at least if he can see our faces, he can.
Is your video working, Eric, so you could wave at us, or maybe you don't want us to see where you are? Just totally acceptable.
Are you able to hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Loud and clear.
It's weird. It was off mute, but no mic pickup, so I redid it.
I am sorry, everyone, for the trouble.
Eric, maybe if you want to go out and go in again, I don't know why that would be. Oh, wait, unmuted. Oh.
Yeah. This is much better. So thank you for whatever you did. So Emily, if you would call the roll for Pen 2.
Sure.
For the trouble.
Karen Myers, I believe, is absent. Mary Helen Kincaid, I expect to be a little late today. Shayla Garcia.
I'm here.
Great. Dave Anderson.
Somebody's connecting to audio on their iPhone. That's probably Dave.
Hi, do we have Dave Anderson present?
I am.
Perfect. And Eric Molander
Is present. So Pen 2 is in order.
All right, I'll go ahead and call Pen 1 to order. I don't see PJ here. PJ, are you one of the iPhone? Are you one of the phones? No. Okay.
I think
Um,
PJ's out of the office, Eric.
Okay, because I know that Tom Collette is as well. So Betsy Emery
Present.
and Jeff Noodleman
Present.
and Claudio Camposano is present, so that gives us a quorum. All right. So do we want to move on to, I think we've only got a couple of items on the agenda. Amber, I think you're up first with a real estate update.
Yes, I am. Thanks, Claudio. Also some new faces, some new board members have joined since I have been on here last. I do see somebody talking on the iPhone if they. Oh, that's muted. There, we'll stop that kickback. You guys hearing a lot of echoing when I'm talking? No, okay.
You're good.
Anyways, I'm Amber Ayers. I've been with the districts for about 5.5 years. I'm a project manager and a planner by background. And today I'm bringing forth a motion for a contract approval or to move forward with contract negotiations for a firm that we feel really confident about helping us with all of our real estate needs that are going to need to move forward for the PMLS work. Happy to talk through this and provide any background or answer questions or open up the floor.
What are the details?
Good question, Jeff. So as you might know, we have a pretty big lift moving forward with all of the real estate needs. And so we did a formal solicitation to bring forth a right-of-way agent and real estate support services. This involves everything from appraisals, market research, evaluations, all the way through acquisitions. They'll be helping us kind of as well as outreach needs that we need to once we have our talking points out to property owners, and all the way through post-acquisition needs. So anything that we can do involving taxation purposes that might need to happen. So they'll be an on-call with us for about 5 years. This is a maximum not to exceed contract of about $2 million. So there is a lot of work to be done over this next 5 years. And I want to note that of course, with any on-call contract, you as board members will have the right to approve budget requests that come through our annual budgeting proposals. So next year, Mark Wilcox and I put together a proposal that spans 4 project codes, everything from in-kind eligibility, real estate, relocations, and 4 project codes, and that is totaling a request of about $640,000 for next year that we expect to utilize this contract for.
Okay, I see some hands up and a question in the chat. So Eric, I think I saw your hand first, but Jim, if you have a clarifying point you want to make, maybe before, if
Yeah, just real quickly, that this is all in service of the capital program. We need to ensure the public interest is in place before the feds can use their funds or we can use bond funds. So we're getting the appropriate easements, permissions, controls on the properties to ensure that we meet all the financing laws associated to public interest. Thank you. Sorry to step in front of you, Eric.
No, I appreciate that clarification, Eric.
So does this include legal services for negotiations?
Good question, Eric. This does not actually. We have separate legal support that we will not be utilizing an on-call, or at least this firm's legal support. So we have our own, that we are using.
And I see Betsy had a question in the chat. What's the source of funds to support the 2 million?
Supports of this will be, well, this is going to be approval through your annual budgeting process. So this will be dependent on revenue that we accrue every year. So this will be this is identified through some of the GEO bond funding that's up for proposals as well.
Ken, I see your hand.
Yeah, the written documentation says 160,000 not to exceed. Where does the 2 million come in?
Ken, you're probably looking at the individual. Are you looking at the MCDD board motion?
Yeah, so it's cumulative to the boards.
Yes, so each board has a separate amount, and that is based on the properties impacted by the proposals moving forward. So Penn 2 actually has the largest contract.
Great, thanks for the clarification.
Betsy?
Great, thank you. I guess I'm curious, like, if that's pretty common practice to be expending GO dollars when we haven't made it through a ballot yet. Like, we don't have guarantee that those dollars are on the table yet, and so there is potential that that bond doesn't pass, and then what?
Jim, I might bump this one towards you. I mean, we next year's funds are already identified, but you're right, this is contingent on several things. Or Lori?
I can respond to that actually. So with our on-call contracts such as these, we are not required to spend the funds that are identified within the contract, but the contract does then allow us that capacity. So this is a multi-year contract. We have to anticipate the potential sources of funding that may come through to the districts, and the GO bond is a potential source of funding. The urban board will see in their proposed budget that we also have a fund within the proposed budget that includes the GO bond should the bond be approved. So does not mean that we will spend the money if we don't receive the money, but you do in your financial planning need to anticipate the potential spending. So this contract will not require that we give all of this business to this company, but it does allow us the capacity should we move forward with having those sources of funding. Does that answer your question? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Lori. I also just want to clarify, this has come up before in on-call contracting services, is this is a tool and a mechanism for us to be able to do our job. As Lori said, this is we are not obligated, but this allows us, we have a lot of needs moving forward and we needed the support services, and this allows us an easy way to be able to get that support.
Claudio, I think I'm next.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that was an old hand. I just wanted to get somebody who hasn't asked a question yet. But if you're next, and we'll get Jeff after you.
All right, thank you very much. So, Amber, from my perspective, this really feels like it's an urban board issue. Not only will they be existing during the time that the contract is in place, and so can provide oversight, it's not clear that Penn 2, MCDD, or any of the rest of us will be. So what I'd urge you to do is just go ahead and plan for it at the urban level, because that's where the oversight is going to be available.
And I can take that one too.
We need to move more quickly than that. We have services that we need to
I don't think so, Jim. I think that what we see is no, well, actually, it's Lori's turn. So, Lori, why don't you go ahead and take it?
Sure. We're in an interesting situation right now where we've got an awkward few months where the urban board has not called for dissolution, and we've got work that we need to be going through a proposal process and continuing to work towards getting contracts in place so that when we get to that point, if the call for dissolution moves forward and we consolidate to the urban district, we'll have contracts in place to be able to do the work that we need to do next summer. And so we have talked a lot internally about the timing of some of these contracts. You're going to see a couple of others that come through where we've started the RFP processes now. We need to designate in the process which districts those contracts will be developed with, but we also are including in those RFPs the information to the proposers that when we move forward with the consolidation to the urban district, that contract will be transferring from the legacy districts to the urban district. So it is kind of an interesting time for us, but in order to be able to move forward and make sure that we're prepared to do the work that we need to do, we are having to develop those contracts under the legacy districts, and then those contracts will transfer over and be an urban district contract when we do the consolidation. So I understand the question. It is going to be an odd couple of months for us as we continue to move forward with approval of contracts with the knowledge that those will be transferring over. And this is one of those. So we do have work in Pen 2 should the consolidation not move forward. We have work that will need to happen within Pen 2. And we have, when we developed those individual district budgets, which we're not planning on moving forward with, but were the basis for the new consolidated urban district budget. We did have work in Pen 2 that is real estate related. And so what you're seeing in that dollar estimate is related to the properties should the consolidation not move forward. But we do know this is kind of an awkward time.
Thank
Jim, you were going to add something?
Lori took it.
Perfect. So since all this work is for next summer, what I would recommend that you do is just go ahead and move it to the urban board, have them budget for it. And since it's part of PMLS and they're the party that ultimately is responsible for it, have it be under their aegis to approve the budget and then to oversee it. I feel a little bit uncomfortable approving something that I know that as Pen 2 will never actually have any oversight over.
Eric, I appreciate that. I also want to just remind folks of the background and that we have done to get to this point. Last year, we gave a board presentation on our real estate gap analysis. That's where we looked at all of our existing rights in order to set ourselves up for it. We realized that we don't have very good real estate rights on a lot of the property that's going to be impacted, not just for PMLS, but for us to be doing any of our work for operations and maintenance. A lot of that is just work that has not been formalized in, say, legal agreements. This work is needing to keep pace. We have high-risk properties that could really impact that work. And so I feel like we do have we've done a lot of background research. We're setting ourselves up. And honestly, this first task order with this agency would be a small amount just to get them up to speed on the project itself.
Great. Jeff, you've had your hand up for quite some time.
Great, thanks, everybody. And yeah, to that point, Amber, well stated. I mean, I certainly familiar with the long history and all the incredible work that staff, many folks who are not on this call, all your predecessors have done on this issue. I could probably pull up many Excel spreadsheets and the like of the very, very critical issues. So I understand the issue. Here are my follow-up questions, and I'm just going to throw them all out there in no particular order, and then I'll shut up and listen. So one, I noted that this is a Seattle-based entity. Without naming names, I'm just curious if any Oregon entities actually put in bids. Two, has this particular entity worked on comparable projects? And then finally, did your team, as far as the due diligence process, talk to any customers as far as how they did? But more than anything, I'm curious about the comparable type of project. So there you go. Thanks.
Great question, Jeff. These were exactly the sort of questions that we addressed during the solicitation itself. They do have a local chapter here. So they are the fastest growing right-of-way and real estate support services in the Pacific Northwest. There was 3 firms that all met. We got about 6 total proposals. All 3 were exceptionally well. They've been highly recommended by agency partners working on large infrastructure projects through, say, the city of Portland, the interstate bridge replacement. There was the Selwood bridge work. They all have very comparable work, and Common Street itself, there was no doubt that they have the expertise in-house to do that, and a local staff that's very familiar with the area.
Great, thank you. Tanny, I saw your hand next.
Thank you, Claudio. How does this work with us transferring our assessment authority over? Are we taking on a contract that we really can't cover?
No, because all of the contracts will transfer over to the new district and the
Okay.
remaining dollars that are on those contracts.
Right. But I'm just trying to figure this out because I feel like the legacy districts are kind of on hospice now. And we're taking on a 5-year contract when we may not be here for 5 months.
But again, all the contracts and agreements will transfer to the new district upon dissolution as a matter of law. And as staff has recommended, we really need these contracts in place to keep moving so we can be prepared to go ahead with the capital construction program.
But this is for the bond, correct?
There's multiple funding sources for multiple project types that are covered through this contract, and we'd be using individual task orders to complete that work, and associated budgets would be aligned with the type of work.
Okay, so do we know what parts of it are bond related and what parts are not?
Again, it's an open contract on a task order basis, so it doesn't require us to spend any particular color of money or any amount of money, but it gives us the opportunity to do so to support our staff going forward with the real estate needs. So no, it doesn't obligate any particular type of funding. It merely gives us the authority to issue task orders because we'll have a contract approval in place. Anything over $100,000 has to be approved by the board, and all budget authority would need to be approved in the annual budget process.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Tanny. Thank you, Jim. Mary Helen, I saw your hand next.
I would need a explanation in terms that I could explain to neighbors. This all seems very technical. I've been involved in some Park Bureau activity with the Vanport place marking project, and as far as the land by the golf course that has been spoken to, and I think Mark has some information on that, but it seems like I'm being asked to spend my neighbor's money, and it's not clear. It's for a number, it sounds like it's for a number of different things and a number of different pockets of money. And so in all fairness to the landowners whose money I'm responsible for, is it possible to give me something that could be translated into neighborhood speak as opposed to financial PMLS, all of those kinds of things? My concern is that a number of our documents do not have even language translations. And so I think that would be an important thing here to speak to our equity of making the information available to people that English is not a first language. So if that could be done, that's fine. If not, tell me how that could happen.
I can try and answer the first question, and then I'll hand over to Jim or to Colin on the translation issue. So in English version, Mary Helen, for your neighbors, is that the authorization to spend money is your budget. And your board approved your budget for this year, last June. So that is the document that tells us what we can spend. There are other guardrails then on that spending. One of them being that the board approves contracts that are higher than $100,000. We still don't have authorization to spend above the budget. That contract then allows us to work with particular contracting organizations to do the services that we need. It does not require us to pay them the total amount. If we assign them a task on a task order, then they can do the work on that task order, but the dollars that we assign to that task order still have to be within the limits set by the budget. So the budget is really the rules that we follow as far as spending your neighbor's money on the services that we provide. On-call contracts allow us a way to do a competitive bidding process to come up with a contract that gives us multiple years worth of services, but it doesn't require us to spend those dollars. It just allows us the capacity to continue to do the work that we need to do to support your neighbors. But the contract itself is not the authorization to spend the money that your neighbors are providing for the services that we're doing. The budget is really the document that provides that authorization. Does that make sense? And is that in English enough?
I think I can handle that part, but when you
Okay.
say the budget for the project, the budget for MCD.
The budget that you approved in June, which goes through the sources of revenue and the categories of spending that we are approved to move forward with each year. So that annual budget document that you approve in June.
So this is an addition to that budget or adjustment to that budget?
No, this is no change to the budget at all. This is a contract for services that includes dollars that could be spent, but those dollars that we spend still have to align with the amount of the budget that was approved.
Okay,
So
I'll defer to Eric as far as the budget and what we approved and amounts, because if we didn't approve it in June, why or we did approve it in June, why are we voting to approve it now?
You approved the budget in June, and this is a contract to spend money consistent with the budget.
Okay.
Remember when Nancy talked about the envelope? This is sort of the envelope, and then we can pick services using that envelope. Sort of like hiring a architect and getting them on board and having the ability to work with them maybe before you and your partner have decided how you exactly want to redesign your house. But you have access to that architect now, and every time you talk to them, they send you a bill. But for us, we have to get authorized by the board before we talk to them. Maybe that helps. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that does. It's just people have understandings of this is what the budget was, and now we're saying, I understand authorizing a contract to spend the money in the budget, but I'm not clear on what part of our budget we authorized, and so that's why I said I'd defer to Eric because he's much smarter about that than I am. Thank you.
So this was really not part of.
I just wanted to answer the question about translation. We do have services available if somebody wants a translation and they contact us. So if you have someone who needs translation or someone reaches out to us, we would certainly make a translation available. And we look forward to improving the program and being more proactive in some of our translation work. So we have more to do in that. Hopefully we'll be able to make progress.
And that was not part of this conversation, but that was part of the ballot measure difficulty because there's no place for a non-English speaker to read anything about what the ballot member.
Duly noted. And thank you for bringing that up, Mary Helen.
Just to embroider a little bit on what Jim was saying on the translation and also interpretation, the contractor has in-house outreach. So I think one piece just to emphasize is that a lot of this real estate work is communications and outreach and working closely with property owners. So they have an in-house service that does that, which can be bolstered by the contracts that we have for both interpretation and for translation services. And just one other note, the 4 districts are the local sponsor of the PMLS project. So there's also, while that will be transitioned, if there's a vote for the dissolution, this contract is also in alignment with the current PMLS local sponsorship agreement, non-federal sponsor agreement, as well as the local sponsorship of the levies that the individual districts currently have. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Colin. Mark, I see your hand went up, and I'm guessing you have important clarifying information, so I'll go to you next, and then go back to the questions.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to a few details that the other staff didn't quite speak to, and just to clarify, and I want to thank Amber for all her work on getting this contract together. It is indeed a mechanism to do. First and foremost, the highest priority is the work that we need to do to stay in line with the timeline for the Army Corps of Engineers. And the budget that we have at this time is very, very small, and it is just enough to do the onboarding that we need to do and have the real estate contractor come up with a plan for the next few years. The first phase of the PMLS will be pump station work, and there are some real estate instruments that will be needed. So these folks will work to do that, but they'll also start to do the advanced outreach that Colin spoke to for the other areas like Northern Penn 2, that is obviously very complicated. And we want to make sure everybody is that we get people informed ahead of time before right-of-way agents start to approach them for agreements. But all that you will see in your budgets, and that's budgeted. The first slug of projected work is in the next year's budget proposal. You'll see those coming up. But we do have to stay on track with the PMLS work, and there'll be other projects, other capital projects that this will support. And as Colin and Jim said, this is just getting us the ability to have these expert folks on at our disposal to do the important work that needs to be done, that staff doesn't have the expertise to fully execute, from appraisals to outreach, and then actually completing the final negotiations and transactions for real estate. And we'll be happy to do a future board presentation to remind you of all the real estate elements. We've done a few in the past, but it has been a while to get everyone up to speed. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mark. Corky, you've had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, just chiming in because I think these are really, really good questions. We're coming into a phase here where it's going to continue, I think, to be confusing and a little unsettling. One is from a budget perspective, sort of like what Mary Helen brought up. And the other is the idea that, well, why are we making this decision when we're not going to be the ones handling it later on? Why don't we pass that off to the urban board? And so I'm just reminding everybody that we set this up initially so that these 4 districts would make these decisions right up to the point where the permanent urban district, which has not been seated yet, comes into place. And so I expect that we're going to have more of these. And it is a little unsettling, but I think we just kind of have to get past that hump a little bit, would be my suggestion. Betsy had an interesting idea in the chat of, well, why do we do a 1-year contract? But again, you know, we're going to have more of these questions as we go forward, I think. And we just have to accept this concept that we're going to make decisions now. The permanent district will be seated, and they're going to have to live with it. So let's all be responsible. My biggest problem is that we're hiring somebody from Seattle instead of Portland, but I'll put my prejudices aside because I've heard there are some nice people in Seattle. I don't know it yet, but so thanks.
Great, thank you, Corky.
Corky, they do have a local chapter. These are local staff members that live and work locally here in Portland.
Thank you. So I can hang on to my prejudice. Thanks, Amber.
Thank you, Corky. And thank you, Amber. Betsy, you were next.
Yeah, kind of along those lines. I mean, I put this in the chat and there's been some comments already about it, but I do, you know, similar to what's been voiced by other folks on this call, like, it is really interesting to think about like making decisions that bind the hands of a board that hasn't been set yet. And I understand the value in long-term contracts. I understand the value in having a work order that you can bill against through task orders or whatever you end up calling them. But you know, that's a difficult decision to make, I think. And so I do wonder, like, what is is there a real risk in setting a 1-year contract, you know, that is at a lower amount that allows them to do the work that's necessary to get PMLS off the ground and start those real estate negotiations, but also provides flexibility for the urban board to define the details of the future work based off the budget that they have. I know there's a number of things, you know, that are up for the legislative session in the coming session next year. Like, there's a lot of moving pieces to what the budget is and who sits.
May I just suggest that there's no obligation on a future board to continue with this contract. It's an on-call contract. So if the future board doesn't want to authorize task orders, they don't have to. Or if they wanted to hire a new firm with a different scope, they could as well. So rather than having us go through another 6-month process of procurement, making all the firms go through new proposal preparation and all the scoring and effort that we go in, we'd rather hope that we could keep going with this, but certainly a future board has the opportunity to make changes. They're not stuck with this. It just gives us the opportunity to use these services more efficiently. So I would urge the board to follow the staff recommendation and let this move forward. Thank you.
Yeah, that kind of leans even more into my argument of like, in the future, there would be a more concrete work order plan that you actually have to like solicit quotes against. Like there are a variety of reasons as to why I think like you would want. And I get that 6 months of procurement is a time consuming process that takes staff time and overhead, but also like
the scope of work's not
completely
Just a point of
different.
clarification, Jim, if I heard correctly, there's no, the new board has no obligation to utilize this contract whatsoever. They could just put it in a drawer and not task order anything against it ever again. And they would even be free to solicit additional, they could solicit another contract, on July 1 if they wanted to.
Yeah, I guess the main message is we're not tying anyone's hands. We're giving staff access to experts that we need. And the future board has full authority to do what it wants to do.
So just another quick clarifying question. I know that from my perspective, it seems like we're, in the same way that we expect, Colin and Mark to keep pushing this effort forward. This seems like between now and July 1 or whenever there may be dissolution and the creation of the urban district. So this is really to make sure that over the next several months and then hopefully continuing, you would be able to have that real estate expertise to keep moving all of these different pieces forward. Absent that, we would be pausing that work. Is that correct? Okay, I just wanted to make sure of that. So I think Eric, you were next.
Just to answer Mary Helen's and then to bring up another question about the role of the budget. Limited money was in our FY 23-24 budget for real estate acquisition services. And in fact, I don't ever remember seeing it in there. So the budget that Amber will be spending against is the potential budget for fiscal year 24-25. Now, at this point, Amber, I think that Lori had said that Penn 2 is going to have the bulk of the expense associated with that. What are you putting into our FY 24-25 budget for spending against this contract? And what are the kinds of tasks and dollar values associated with it?
Lori, do you want to take the first crack at that one since you've been
Yeah, well, I just want to clarify. I didn't say the bulk of the spending was on Penn 2, but I did say there is some real estate spending that has been identified for properties that are in the Penn 2 district area.
So in the current fiscal year, I think Mr. Molander has a question. Are there forecasted expenses in the current fiscal year under this contract? And if so, what are they? Is that correct, Derek? I'll make sure you get your question answered.
So it's really twofold. One is to identify what the likely spending in FY 24-25 will be. And then if there is a budget impact for the current year, FY 23-24, what is that anticipated to be? And do we have the funds within the current budget to handle it?
Thanks for clarifying. Lori, you want to take that?
Mark, do you want to talk about the current year? The budget for 24-25, that question is a little more challenging because Penn 2, should they go forward, does not have enough resources to cover all of the spending needs for 24-25, which meant that we had to make some reductions to primarily the real estate spending on PMLS under Penn 2 in order to get Penn 2's 24-25 budget balanced. That information hasn't been presented to the board because we're still moving forward with a consolidated urban district budget. But I think Mark could talk about the types of activities that are anticipated on the real estate contract as a task order in the current year for the Penn 2 properties.
Yeah,
I think Eric's question may be more broad than that for all the districts, if I'm not mistaken. So,
yeah, I'd love to just give you an overview of this year, this fiscal year, and next fiscal year, what we expect. This fiscal year, there is budget. It's in 10104, which is PMLS real estate. That has a project code that spans all 4 districts, and is allocated proportional to project work throughout the 4 districts. As I recall, last time I checked it, probably approximately 2 weeks ago, I think there was cumulative about $40,000 in it. That is the level of effort we expect for the remainder of this fiscal year, as we just get a prospective real estate services contractor on board, and so onboard them and start to develop a strategic plan. And then the boards will have visibility on what that strategic plan is, and how, as we get new information and as everything evolves, the new board will also have much more visibility on what this contract is expected to provide. And I will just jump back to earlier questions. These folks have supported projects such as the Willamette water project, such as the IBRP, and local projects, local large-scale projects, very similar linear projects. So speaking to next fiscal year, we do have a larger budget request. That number was based on, and I haven't seen the adjustments that Lori spoke to, so I'd rather not speak to it, that exact amount. But I would tell you the types of activities that we are hoping to move forward on. In the past, we have discussed with all 4 boards, multiple occasions, potential contingent purchases of properties. Well, we're getting to that. So that was about 2 years ago. We're getting to that time where we may need to actually make some of those purchases, or they're still contingent. There's a possibility of ownership or transfer of ownership happening on one of those very key parcels, and we need to be prepared to expend those funds. If we don't need to expend those funds, part of the figure you'll see in your budget package is, again, contingent. The other portion is for the first phase of potential construction of pump stations for the PMLS. And so that's what you'll see in there. We want to stay in lockstep with the Corps. We don't have an agreement to move forward with construction. We don't have congressional appropriations yet. We're on track for about April 2025 to sign a project partnering or a construction agreement. And then we'll be asked very soon after that to have those real estate instruments in place. And that's why we need this real estate contract in place, so that we can move forward with that. And then, as everyone has said, if it's all task order based, and we can cut it off if the new board, to the point that was made earlier, if the new board isn't satisfied with the way that the contractor is carrying out these activities on our behalf, we're not obligated, and we can move forward with a new procurement. But this work is really critical. If those of you haven't been on following the PMLS for the entirety of its inception, it's important that you stay on track with the Corps. We still have to stand up for our own rights and needs as a non-federal sponsor, but congressional appropriations wait for no other folks. And if those are in place and we are struggling to keep up with minor real estate agreements because we don't have the contracted services, we could fall behind on the overall project, and we might finally move off the timeline and not be able to take advantage of the federal appropriations. I hope that helps answer a bunch of different questions.
Yeah, but it really does.
But
So you're not answering the question of, what is the budget and what are the tasks that go into it? And you're asking me as a board member to approve something, and you say, oh, well, you don't have to agree to it in the future. But the reality is that what we need to do is for you guys to be straight with us and say, here's what we expect to spend in Pen 2 in FY 24-25. You've already stated that this is to pay the contractor to do their homework on the project in 23-24, which is basically to get up to speed on this or do things that are their homework. And at some point, I mean, it really says that you're asking me to approve something when I have no idea how much money in 24-25 that's going to be.
$341,000. There was a budget request of 1.6 million. The district is short in funding by 1.3 million. So we have a remaining $341,000 worth of real estate work on PMLS in the Pen 2 budget. If we consolidate.
All right, so that 341, what tax does that cover?
That will cover, that covers actually potential in the event that the real estate moves forward quickly enough to reach an agreement and to purchase all the real estate that's required for the first phase increment pump stations, as well as some of those contingent parcels. So that covers all the work.
So Jim, one of the things I think that we need to do in this instance.
I just want to ask. Yeah, I just want to ask. When is Pen 2 expected to have their budget discussion?
So right now there isn't an expected budget discussion because we are on target to move forward with consolidation July 1st. So the Urban Board will be approving their 24-25 budget and then adopting it in June after a TSCC hearing, and that will outline the spending for next fiscal year.
Okay, thank you.
So Claudio, again, it just seems like this is an urban contract issue, and we've got a meeting coming up. Let's just have the urban approve the contract.
And just a question for staff, number one, because it was a solicitation, whose solicitation was it, and would the urban be able to take it on? That would be just a practical question. And second, does the urban have budget in 23-24 to be able to fund the work that you're looking to do? Obviously, just two points of information to help clarify whether it's even a viable option.
So first, it was a multi-district request for proposals because we don't have a call for dissolution at this point on the table with the urban district. So we are, as I talked about earlier, we're in an awkward point in time for the next couple of months where we don't have the call for dissolution. We need to continue. We can't just stop doing solicitations until we get to July 1. We need to continue. And this has been solicited as a multi-district contract. We have put in all of our solicitations and all of our contracts that there is a planned transition to the urban district. So the people that we're contracting with are well aware that there is a planned transition and that the contract will transfer to the new district. But we are in an odd time where we need to continue to do our work. And so this solicitation was run as a multi-district contract. Does the urban budget have money in it for real estate work this year? Not that I'm aware of. I believe that that initial real estate planning was budgeted in the individual district budgets, which is why we ran this as a multi-district solicitation. I guess what I would say too is this timing where you're doing solicitations in the last quarter of the year for the upcoming year is nothing new for any local government in the state. We do budgeting on an annual basis, but we don't stop our work in the final quarter to wait to see that we have budget for the next year. We contract with the anticipation of the budget. If the budget authority doesn't get authorized, we don't spend the money. and we don't move forward, but we need to continue with the contracting, both from a work allocation standpoint. I have 2 staff in procurement, not a lot of people to do a lot of work that we have to get done. So we really allocate out the timing of these procurement activities. It takes a long time to do a government procurement action. So from start to finish, you've got quite a few months worth of activity to get one of these contracts in front of the board, as you're seeing today. It takes the people that are bidding on these RFPs a significant amount of time to pull together the information. If we start to get a reputation as an organization that our board is not going to approve the contracts after folks have gone through the effort to put together proposals, we will stop having success at receiving proposals. So I'm hoping that we can continue with this regular process and be able to get our contracts approved, so that we can, as staff, continue to do our work.
And I just want to stress, you're not authorizing spending. That's done in the budget. There's a limited amount of spending needed this year to keep moving. The urban board, should we achieve consolidation, will approve a budget with specific information about the work for next fiscal year. So again, you're giving us the authority to access experts. We need to move our construction program forward. That's what we're asking for your approval of. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Lori and Jim. I just want to recognize that we are well over our time, not just for this item, but for our board, the various boards portion of the meeting. This is a very robust discussion, and really appreciate everybody's willingness to dive in and staff's willingness to give us great answers. So I think that with that, we'll just we'll move through these last couple of questions. And then we'll figure out where to go from here. So Chris, I think you're next.
Thank you. And thank you, staff, for your clarifications on a couple of questions. So I'll try to keep mine as quick as possible in the interest of time. It's 2 parts and maybe correlated. The first is, can you describe, as far as, because you obviously have procurement thresholds as far as when you can make something internal versus to a board. As you were thinking about the scope of services, how did you scale that? And then that relates to the second question as to how did 5 years get arrived at? And I think, Mike, I'll add a footnote to that. I think one of the concerns I have that a couple of people have shared is, yeah, it's a take it or leave it. It's there in your back pocket if you need it. But at the same rate, while you're also intending to have a new governing structure, you're also intending to add staff to this new agency. And I'm curious to know, would prospective new staff take on those responsibilities once this work is exhausted or continues on into the future? Thank you.
So on the staff, I'll start with the staffing question, then I'll try to work my way back. So we have an IGA between MCDD and the urban district to transfer all of the existing staff from MCDD to the urban district. We don't anticipate big changes in that staffing in the upcoming year. We know that we'll need to start to ramp up should the GO bond pass. And we will need additional project management staff to be able to keep all of these projects moving. But at this point, there's not a significant increase in project management staff that is contemplated in the budget. So the same people that are doing the work now are going to change the logo on their shirt and be urban district people next year doing the same work and keeping this forward. This, as far as a 5-year contract, it's pretty typical for procurement processes that are this large to look at a 3 to 5 year horizon. This RFP contemplates a process where in this year we're doing the initial planning and they're really helping us to pull together how are we going to do all of this huge work that is ahead of us. And then the work starts to build. So to ask a contractor to do the planning and then drop them off is going to be pretty inefficient and a pretty ineffective use of tax dollars, because if we go through another procurement process next year and get a different firm, they're going to have to rebuild on that same planning process. And so it is going to end up costing the taxpayer more money if we don't build on this work that needs to be performed. So that's really why we developed the 5-year contract plan was for that continuation of their staffing to be able to build on the work that we're creating now. So this year is the initial steps. It's that planning and really helping us to develop how we're going to approach this. But it's important that the people that are doing the planning then can continue with us. Are we required to keep them if they're not performing the way we want them to perform? Absolutely not. But that 5-year horizon really helps us to be effective stewards of this tax dollar and not keep reiterating the same work over and over again and costing our taxpayers more money. Did I answer all your questions? I know there were multiple questions there, but I am not
No,
sure.
I think the other one was any internal discussion as far as, again, your threshold to take this action to the board.
It's
and I think-
$100,000 for each contract. So anything that's over $100,000 we bring to our board. We don't game the system. So we could have said, okay, we're just going to assign $90,000 to each of you and not come and talk about this. But that's not how we do business. We really spent the time to say in each of these components, you know, what do we think the work is that's involved for each of these districts? And that's how we came up with the dollars, and those dollars exceeded our threshold, which is why we're here today. We want to be transparent about the work we're doing. We want to be cost effective with the work we're doing, but we also, you know, need board support when we need to move forward with things that are over $100,000. So that's why we're here today.
Okay, thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you, Lori. Thanks, Chris. Ken?
Yeah, this topic is near and dear to my heart, and I can feel for Colin and Mark and Lori. I used to be the International Right-of-Way president, and I used to represent a variety of different agencies, both federal, local, you name it, state. And the key is having long-term contracts on these right-of-way deals because they're not done overnight. And you can't just switch in 1 year over to a new contractor, because there's a ton of build-up knowledge that is needed. And so a 5-year on-call contract is very common for most public agencies, and it's because of that. You need the continuity of the team, and they need to know the project. Also, the Corps of Engineers that this is going toward that project, they're not viewing us as individual districts, they're viewing us as one district. They don't, you know, not necessarily that one's combined or not. They're looking us for, you know, a unified voice, and we have to proceed as if we're going to do the entire project, and that is doing the right-of-way work, advanced work, etc. So I would say, you know, my vote is to support the team. They're in the weeds, they know best, and you're not committing. This isn't a budget meeting. This is just authorizing an on-call contract that can be utilized if the budget is there and authorized by the boards. So I don't think we need to get into the individual, you know, how they're going to contract for things or how long the contract is, as long as it's within conforming to MCD's policies and long-term traditions, or the other districts' long-term traditions. That's just my 2 cents.
Great. Thank you, Ken. Mary Helen?
Another one of my needs for definition, because I've heard several different terms. With the ongoing discussions with the Portland Park Bureau over easement access to the property at the Heron Lakes Golf Course, one, is that factored into the budget? Is that what you're referring to as the properties in Northern Penn 2? That's number one question. And the other one is, are these, when you say appropriations from U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, have they been appropriated specifically for this project, the 100 million, or is that the 100 million that FEMA makes available to projects throughout all the states? So do we have the, I'm going to say, like Nancy Hendricks' term or Jim's term, is this money in an envelope that they're waiting for us to give them information to spend? Or is it relying upon approval of the current federal budget, which is projected to be cut by about 35% and has different directions to U.S. Army Corps of Engineers?
So we have initial funding for the Corps of Engineers. It's appropriated, it's in the bank. We also have funding that was approved in the current continuing resolution that was just adopted by the House and the Senate. So for now, the Corps has funding to move forward with our project, and that's where our contributions for the real estate become really critical. But I want to be clear, Mary Helen, we don't have the full 100 million yet, because that's going to be subject to annual appropriations by Congress. But we've received appropriations in the last 3 years, and the initial work on this real estate has federal funding intact and in place. So that's why we need to keep moving forward. I hope I answered your question. If not, I'd be happy to try and clarify.
Okay, I have a little bit of a clarification on it. When you said, I'm guessing you were referring to Senate Bill 1517, which passed both the House and the Senate, and is
No, I was talking
still
about the Congress, Mary Helen, the federal side. That's the
the
states.
federal Congress. Okay, so they have said we will spend up or $100 million specifically on the Portland, Oregon PMLS, whatever their terminology is. And that's part of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers budget that is appropriated to FEMA to spend on projects. I guess when you said the money's in the bank, I believe that.
So the money will be appropriated to the Corps on an annual basis. So they have it
Appropriated
received
by the federal government.
Congress. By
Okay,
the Congress. Congress has to appropriate funds. They have appropriated funds for the current fiscal year for the Corps of Engineers to move forward with the design of the PMLS project. The contract we have asked you to approve today is critical to our ability to maintain our partnership with the Corps in the design phase of the PMLS. What I'm trying to explain to you is that the Corps has been authorized for up to 100 million, but that 100 million will come every year in increments over the next 10 years through congressional appropriations. For the current year, the Corps has adequate appropriations to move forward, and we are in the president's proposed budget for next fiscal year. So things are looking good for the next couple of years on the investments from the federal side, which is why we need the local contract to move forward with our end of the partnership on the real estate side.
okay. And then the first one, I think Mark could probably answer quickly, is the project that you're talking about in Northern Penn 2, the issue with the Park Bureau and the golf course.
These services will help us with that issue, but I was speaking when I was thinking of Penn 2, Northern Penn 2, that was speaking of the Bridgeton and Marine Drive neighborhoods, because that's one of the more intense portions of real estate activity. But yes, there's a lot of real estate activity in Penn 1, which includes working with the golf course and the raceway and some of the private landowners in northwestern and northeastern Penn 1. But these services will help us with the entire picture, and we're going to acquire these services or phase the contractor's support based on looking at what the design and construction schedule is and see what makes sense in terms of prioritizing real estate activity based on the design and construction schedule.
So this is anticipated costs to negotiate with the city about either right away or the city and Heron Lakes Golf Course and their members to negotiate with them about utilization of the railroad embankment area, and if they don't negotiate eminent domain filings. Is that what I understood from way back when?
In a nutshell, yeah, it's we're doing a lot of the negotiation with the city through the task force that we've been undertaking over the last year and a half. So a lot of that pre-discussion will happen for the public lands in that forum, but these real estate consultants will help us close the transactions and actually get the actual easements. For a lot of the private land holdings, all those pre-negotiations will happen with the contractor and on. But in short, yes, this contract will support that work to whatever extent the ongoing discussions we're having directly with the city, need additional support.
Yeah,
and
Mark,
appraisals and things like that.
Just a point of clarification there. I mean, I appreciate Mary Helen's question, but it's really these services would provide negotiation support for all of the real estate work. The fact that there is 17 acres-ish of property that is currently Portland Parks and would need to be, under some agreement with the district and with the Corps. That's just part of the larger real estate picture because we're not going to be using the railroad embankment as our levee. We need to build a parallel levee. So there's a real estate transaction to be performed there. And that's one of the larger ones, but one among many within the larger picture, right? So there's deals in Penn 2, in MCDD, everywhere where we need to get easements, both permanent easements, construction easements, etc.
Well, bless you. Thank you for the answers. I see that as a difficult living out here in that area and concerned or involved with both. I see a interesting further discussion.
Great.
Thanks.
Kenzie.
Thanks. I wanted to reflect back to, I think it was Mary Helen who mentioned it's really helpful to be able to explain it to your neighbor. I completely agree with that. So I've been thinking about what analogy resonates for me. I know it's way more complex than this, but I'm going to really simplify it and see if this analogy resonates for anyone else. It's the best I could come up with. I think about it like for my household budget, if I knew I was really going to need a truck. And what we're doing now is not buying a new truck. It's enabling the option to borrow my neighbor's truck in the future. And I'm still going to have to figure out like my family's budget of how, if I'm going to do that, when I'm going to do that, how much I'm going to actually spend on that. But just having that option is really valuable. And so that's the analogy, not buying a truck, like enabling that option. And going back to it's most efficient to have these long 5-year contracts. When I heard that, I got a little nervous because I agree, I don't want to be making decisions I'm not best suited to make into the future. But again, I think we're enabling the option for the most efficient path going forward. The option to stay with the same provider for 5 years, if that is deemed appropriate all throughout those 5 years. However, we're not locking us in to renting the same truck for the same neighbor for the next 5 years. So that's my analogy that I've been working on. I don't know if anyone has a better one, please let me know. And if that, unless anyone screams, no, you're thinking about this totally wrong, then I'm personally comfortable moving forward. And I, honor the great work of staff to get us to this point. I also just wanted to share, I have a hard stop at 2:30. So if we are going to vote on this, I would ask if MCDD could go first. Of course, every board should do what they need to be comfortable, but I just wanted to share that personal timing constraint.
Great. I appreciate that. And actually, if others have time constraints, please let us know. I know that Jim has an update that he wants to share with us, but maybe Tanny, if you want to ask your question or make your comment, and then we can talk about perhaps making motions.
You bet. Thank you, Claudio. And I guess one thing I want to say is this is not about not supporting staff or anything. This is just figuring out who's paying what and how the contract's going to work. Okay, for SDIC, we had like just over 10,000 built into the budget for easement work. And the contract's for 140. And so I'm guessing that once we crest this 10,000, there's going to be a request to spend additional funds of the 140, right?
Yes, Tanny. Yes, that's for next year.
Okay. And that's the budget that we don't have.
And mind you, that's over 5 years, and that's a not to exceed amount. So there is increments that are proposed each annual budgeting season.
And the urban board would approve the budget or not for if we're successful with dissolution.
Yeah. It's just hard for me because I'm approving a contract that SDIC is really going to have no ability to fulfill at any point.
But again, it's an on-call contract, so there's no fulfillment obligations. It just creates the option available to use that vendor. So you're not sending any obligations to the urban board that they don't choose to take on themselves.
Yeah. And I would suggest actually that we have any number of obligations that that the budget has not yet been approved for. You know, rent on the building, staff salaries. There's a lot that we have not yet approved, but you will have a chance to approve it if I'm understanding this correctly. Like we are, you know, we are approving the use of the contract, but and there's, as you said, I guess an SDIC $10,000 in this year's budget. If SDIC continues to exist, you'll have an opportunity to approve a new budget for next year, which would be the not to exceed amount for any utilization of the contract going forward. But more likely, we will have an urban district. The urban will pass its budget, and they'll be able to spend up to that amount. So I think that there's actually two sets of controls here. There's the contract not to exceed amount, and then there's the budget that you as SDIC approve this year, and whatever is the governing body next year will approve. So in some, you know, my sense is that we're getting multiple bites at the apple here, and we're not going to swallow the apple until, like, you know, we've had. That's a bad metaphor. I don't know, but you get what I'm saying. And I think I just wanted to comment. You know, I really appreciated, Kenzie, your sort of bringing it down into analogies. For me, it's, you know, it's like, you know, the idea of you know, trying to shorten the contract. I don't want to hire a temp when I know that the work is going to requires a lot of onboarding and is going to be long term. You know, and I don't want to have a new temp in every day to do the work that requires that deep understanding of the situation. So I you know, just really appreciate the work, you know, the thoughtfulness of the team in putting together this solicitation, getting this, getting the you know, actually having it be for a 5-year period, and really, you know, I think Tanny, after you've had a chance to ask your question, I think maybe we want to move on to making motions if they're appropriate.
Yeah, I just don't typically do a contract that I know I've got no ability to fulfill at any level. That's all. Thanks.
Okay. All right. So are there any other comments, questions?
I just put this in the chat. This is Betsy. I don't know if this is the practice generally, but I think given how much discussion there's been and how many various perspectives there are on this, that this should be a roll call vote, not just who are there ayes, are there nays?
Sure. And maybe, you know, before we put this to a vote, if we can actually get some clarity from, because I you know, I definitely get the sense that there's some issues and we may not have total consensus here. I really want to have staff put a fine point on sort of what happens if we do not move forward with this contract.
Amber, do you want to? You're the PM.
Yeah, that's really, thanks, Claudio, because that's what my mind's been thinking about this. It means that we halt our progress as it stands right now. We have a real estate working group that we meet with the core, we meet with legal. This has all been leading up to this point. We have no in-house services related to real estate. I have nobody that we can call upon for appraisals or acquisition support. This does affect our timeline. And so, like I said, this through the end of this fiscal year was really getting them up to speed, getting the task orders in place, creating our scope for this contract so that we do cover everything that we need to over the coming years. And then I would say timeline is going to be greatly affected. And I'm not sure how to relay that to our project partners and to, I mean, it does worry me. Mark, would you like to chime in?
I don't think there's much to add. There's just a lot of work that is required to move forward and get easements in place for the first phase of work, and to just develop a plan, as somebody said. I think it was Ken may have said, you want to sort of walk before you run. This first phase of work is that opportunity for us to walk before we run on real estate issues and acquisitions. And if we build up, we not only jeopardize the potential to sign our project partnering agreement on time and where are those appropriations, but we just lose time in multiple transactions. There's over 140 potential transactions on this project, 140 parcels, big or small, and that it requires a lot of work. So we need to get started.
Yeah, and I want to jump in there, and I'm going to take off my Penn One hat, and I want to emphasize what Lori said earlier about credibility with partners. I've got a team that's ready to negotiate with the districts around the golf course, and we're waiting for a partner. We're waiting.
You and several others, Claudio. I get that, and these.
So I get very concerned as a partner when just around the reluctance of the district to keep moving forward and continuing to work with us. We've got a lot of staff that have put a lot of time into working on this project with the understanding that there was a head of steam and a sense of consensus on the part of these districts to not pass this contract, something that it has absolutely no commitment over multiple years, except to allow the team to move forward over the next couple of months and keep the head of steam that they've built with us over years. It just feels like a very odd choice. So I'm very much in support of moving forward with this contract, and I certainly, as wearing my partner hat, hope that folks continue to build on the credibility of the team and the districts and not erode it.
Can I just ask a quick question, because I don't know who we are, and then Amber alluded to a real estate group, who those people are, because there's a lot more people in this room that know more about this than me, so I don't feel confident voting either way. I do different kinds of contracts. I'm a nonprofit, and I get funding from various governments and corporations. But who are those people that are doing the negotiations or choosing the people or informing you to be where we are today? Are there any board members here on that board besides obviously Claudio, but he's a city employee?
Mary Helen, we're not quite there yet. We do have stakeholder committees and we do have task force groups. We meet with representatives from the Army Corps monthly. We meet with our legal team to review our existing rights so that we can have we've done all of our background research. We know all of our existing real estate instruments and rights. So we have done all of that work so that we can go forward and know what needs to be done.
So there's been no involvement by any of the district boards or the urban board?
Yes, I've done multiple presentations on your existing easement rights. Last year, you guys had a gap analysis that was completed. We even pulled title for lots of properties that are very critical to the success of this project, so that we weren't missing anything. Yes, we have very good handling. We've given you updates along the way, and we will continue to do that. Having a contract like this and a professional in this field will only make us better versed and allow us to give you the information that you need to make these decisions.
Okay, so those, what you referred to as updates, reports at meetings consisted of stakeholder input. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
All right. So I know that we've got Jeff also needs to drop off at 2:30. So Jeff, since yep, let's move to vote. So why don't we start since Jeff's got to go as well. Why don't we start with Penn One? Do I hear a motion?
Sure. Let me find it. It was in the chat. Emily, wasn't it in the chat or?
I put it in the chat for you, Jeff.
Yeah,
but
okay.
But I think you got to change the dollar amount because that was ACDs.
Yeah. So on behalf of Penn One, I'd move to approve and authorize the executive director or their designee to negotiate and sign a contract for on-call real estate consulting services with a maximum contract value of It's 100,000, isn't it?
For us, it's 400,000.
400, sorry, 400,000 with Common Street Consulting LLC for a term of 5 years.
Do I hear a second? I'll second it.
Do you want me to call a roll?
Just a quick question before you call the roll. We've barely got a quorum today. Do we need a unanimous vote of the quorum?
Yes, you need and Allison, you're here, but as the absences don't reduce your requirement, you would need 3 out of 5 as always.
Gotcha. So perhaps then we might want to wait. We've got 2 other members that are not here today. Does it make sense for us to delay our vote if we're concerned about what their input might be? And what would be the timing issues associated with that for staff?
I mean, we can always bring it back for a second vote if it fails.
Yes, we can schedule another special meeting if you'd like to have more in depth or like a one-on-one meeting to talk through.
Well, then why don't we have our vote now? We've got a motion and a second. Call the roll. Jeff?
Aye.
Betsy?
I'm gonna abstain.
And Claudia votes aye. And I don't believe we have anybody else on the line. So I believe that's the vote fails.
Yes.
Okay. Moving on to Pen 2.
So I'm looking at this, is from Ken Anderton, and it says, for Pen 2, I move to approve and authorize the executive director or their designee to negotiate and sign a contract for on-call real estate consulting services with a maximum contract value of $1.3 million with Common Street Consulting LLC. So is there somebody that is going to make that motion? All you have to do is say, yes, I'm going to make that motion.
I'll move to make the motion. This is Shayla Garcia.
Thank you, Shayla. Is there a second?
I'll second.
So Dave Anderson seconds. Is there any further discussion? If not, Emily, could you call the roll call for me?
Sure. Shayla Garcia?
Aye.
Dave Anderson?
Aye.
Eric Molander?
Aye.
And Mary Helen Kincaid? You're muted, Mary Helen.
Sorry, abstain.
Right, so that is 3 votes in favor, 1 abstention, and that motion passes.
All right, let's move on to MCDD.
All right, could I get a board member to have a motion?
Sure. I move to approve and authorize the executive director or their designee to negotiate and sign a contract for on-call real estate consulting services with a maximum contract value of $160,000 with Common Street Consulting LLC for a term of 5 years.
Do I have a second?
This is Kenzie, I'll second.
All right, Emily, can you do a roll call vote?
Sure. Corky Collier?
Aye.
Kenzie Berry?
Aye.
Darian Santner?
Aye.
And Ken Anderton?
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
All right, moving on to STIC.
Okay, thank you, Claudio. Is there a board member that would like to make the motion?
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Damgan.
I move to approve and authorize the executive director or their designee to negotiate and sign a contract for on-call real estate consulting services with a maximum contract value of $140,000 with Common Street Consulting LLC for a term of 5 years.
Okay, is there a second for the motion? I'll second the motion just to put it on the floor. And is there discussion, any discussion on this motion? Okay, Emily, if you could call the roll, please.
Sure. Chris Damjan,
Aye.
Tanny Stephenson,
Aye.
Betsy Emery.
I'm abstaining.
That motion fails. Thank you.
Okay. So moving on to our next order of business, Jim, I think you've got an update for us.
Thank you, everyone. We do have an MCDD vote item still to go, so I'll try and be very brief. I think you all are aware that the Legislative Assembly passed the legislative modifications that we introduced, and so the urban district is poised to have sustainable and adequate operating revenues to take over the assets and liabilities of the legacy districts. We also were successful in referring a general obligation bond, and just on a factual basis, we were successful in winning the endorsement of the Portland Metropolitan Chamber, which despite their moratorium. And so we are on a glide path now. There are some decisions remaining for the urban board to make, so not everything is finished, but we are assured the governor will sign the bill. Jeff Condit is working on a series of resolutions and ordinances that the urban board needs to consider and adopt. We are developing a time frame that we will share with the urban board at their next meeting next week. We'll lay that out. We've met with the leadership of the urban board to walk through that time frame. So if all goes as we hope, we should be able to effect dissolution and stand up the new district beginning July 1st. And so that's really the extent of my report. It's been a huge amount of effort on the part of a lot of different people. And it wouldn't have happened without all of you and all the people who came before you and all the incredible staff and partners who have made this happen. Again, it's not completely done, but it looks very promising that we should be able to successfully stand up the new district on July 1st. We're planning to have a celebration in June, and more information will come out about that as the plan comes together. And then I'm happy to try and answer any of your questions, but thank you all for sticking with it. I know all of you have made hard compromises that didn't feel good to you, and that there may be a few more of those still yet to come. But at this point, it looks like we are on path to be successful with the legislative direction to consolidate the districts. Mary Helen?
I just want to comment on all the complications of being a citizen that didn't know anything about legislation and then had to follow like 3 different bills. But what happens if the governor, the current status that I looked yesterday, it said awaiting or on the governor's desk awaiting signature. What happens if she, well, what I read was that if the governor doesn't sign a bill before, the bill's not signed by the governor before the closing of the legislature, which it did, that I don't understand what could happen. So does that preclude, I mean, let's just say in a perfect world, she signed it, it goes on the ballot and the ballot measure passes. I understand that part. But if the governor doesn't sign it, can it still be on the ballot and or somehow be approved?
The legislation has nothing to do with the bond. It's a totally separate process.
Okay.
It was from operating revenue, so the bond is not affected at all.
I'm sorry, I misspoke. If the legislature does not approve the changes to the code that we requested.
The legislature did approve the changes.
The legislature did, but the governor has not signed the bill. So what happens if she doesn't sign the bill to approve the changes that we requested?
So first we have assurances from her staff that she will sign the bill. Colin, do you want to address what happens if the governor doesn't sign it?
Sure. So right now, all the bills that are approved at the end of the session go into effect. Most of them go into effect 91 days after. Some of them go into effect immediately by an emergency clause. But if it is not signed by the governor, then it is effectively vetoed. So we would go back in through the process to resubmit legislative concept and to re-enter the legislative process.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, Kenzie, you've got a question?
I just, a tactical question. Would it be possible to do the MCDD vote now, or should we reschedule that?
I think if we can do it now, that would be great, but if we need to reschedule it, we can. It should be relatively straightforward, but I recognize your heart out, and my apologies. We probably should have shifted the items. If
Yeah,
we can
Kenzie,
pull that off, it would be great.
I was just putting in the chat, could we vote on it now? Because you gotta
Let's
leave.
go. And I can stick around and answer questions from anybody, so, or you can call me. So
Mark,
really,
can
we
you-
just have the MCDD Gate Tower project.
Can you quickly do it, Mark, and we'll get to the vote?
Yes. I think the memo is very explicit. I'm just speaking to the board regarding the gate tower cleaning and inspection service contract approval. So this is after many years actually getting boots on the ground to inspect these two twin culverts that run under the MCDD SDIC levy. Doing this work, we will clean the culverts and we will inspect them, and that will allow us to finally know exactly how to move forward with the rehabilitation of those culverts and implement a future design contract. Starting next fiscal year, we'll start to move to recruiting a design contractor. But this is just to inform that effort to clean the culverts out, to understand whether the pipes are damaged. They are submerged, and so it's very difficult work, which is why the price tag is what it is. We have to dewater the pipes, move the sediment out, run a crawler up there, use some other methods to tell whether the pipes are deflected and whether we can slip line the pipes, rehabilitate them, or if we need to open up the levee and remove them entirely to replace them, and also to replace the valve that isolates the flow between the Blue Lake Basin and MCDD East and SDIC. We bid the work. It is unusual work. And so we bid it and we received one valid bid. We received one non-responsive or late bid. The bid we received was very high. So staff negotiated with the contractor and answered some questions that addressed some of their concerns about risk, because we had a lot of lump sum items in the bid. And so they hedged their bets there. Once we talked to them and explained to them the nature of the project, they brought the cost of the project down, their proposal down $200,000. And we arrived at a satisfactory figure. So all the numbers are in the memo that you received Friday. And we are asking for a maximum contract value of $325K to enter into this, just in the event this is in water work. It's dewatering work. It's just in case there's any unforeseen circumstances, but we think that we have a really good understanding of the contractor, and more likely than not, we will probably not exceed about 280 to 285,000.
Any questions for Mark?
No, but I want to say, Mark, that I mean, this still looks like a lot of money, and it sounds like a fun job. But what you just described of getting a very high bid, discussing it with the potential contractor, bringing it down to it. Thank you. Wow, great job. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Corky.
I'd echo that, as well as making sure the contractor knows the scope of work and they're not hedging their bets and we're paying more because they're padding it as a risk is really helpful. I appreciate you looking out for the public's dollars.
Thank you.
All right, let's move to a vote.
With that said, I'll move to approve and authorize the executive director or their designee to sign a contract with Dark Horse Construction LLC for the Gate Tower outfalls cleaning and inspection project with a maximum contract value of $325,000.
All right, do I have a second?
This is Kenzie, I'll second.
All right, any further discussion? All right, Emily, can you do a roll call vote?
Corky Collier,
Aye.
Kenzie Berry,
Aye.
Darian Santner, Darian, I see you. I can't hear you.
Now can you hear me? Aye.
Yes, and Ken Anderson.
Aye. And motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
All right, well, that was the last item on our agenda today. Thanks to everybody for sticking around. That was a robust conversation earlier. Sorry to take us longer than expected. Thank you again to staff for being so willing to answer so many questions and be so responsive. And thanks and congratulations again for pulling, I think it's 2 rabbits out of a hat now down in Salem. So really amazing work. Thank you all. So with that, I think we can adjourn. So I think I'm the only one left, but Pen 1 adjourns.
Thank you all.
Yeah, so in this instance, yeah, so Claudia, in the future, why don't you give the groups that aren't going to vote on it the opportunity to adjourn?
Yeah, no,
move
we jumped.
adjournment of Pen 2. Guys, thanks very much for being part of this.
Good discussion. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. I appreciate answering all my questions.
And the MCD is in adjournment as well.
STIC, you're it.
Move to adjourn.
Pardon me? SDIC is adjourned.
All right, thanks everybody.